Hello there, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be going over the third installment of the Scream franchise, which is intended to be the final chapter at the time. In the year of 2000, this is the only film in this franchise that was not consulted or written by Kevin Williamson, and so there are parts of that you can tell a little bit, but I still think that this is a great sequel. It's better than any of the other things that any of the other franchises could come up with. You know, when you talk about the Jason movies and the Halloween and the Freddy movies, there are a lot of bad movies, and I think Scream 3 is still like a 4-star movie. So with all of that being said, let's get right into Wes Craven's Scream 3. So immediately when we open up in Hollywood with Cotton on the Freeway, it's chilling and eerie, and I just really want to appreciate Wes Craven for doing such a great job with this, because a lot of people do have a problem with this movie, but it's still very great, like I said, for what it is. And I actually think that it's very brilliant. I live in Hollywood myself, and after moving out here and living here for 5 years, this is one of my favorite films now. It has definitely become elevated, and I have a lot of defenses for this movie. This franchise is all about being meta, you know? What more can you do to elevate other than a movie being made about it? Well, then, Stab 3, it was so perfect, it's iconic, and I love the whole being in Hollywood, on movie stages, on movie sets. That's where the real fear happens, and that's where the film sets are, and that's the perfect conclusion to this trilogy and this chapter of this story, this whole being aware of films and where they are and what they come from and the rules of them and all of this, and it ties back around so perfectly for me. I know a lot of people don't appreciate that aspect, but I really do. I think this opening kill is way better than the opening kills of Scream 2. I prefer whenever Ghostface calls people on the phone repeatedly. I like that sort of torment. Ghostface is also scarier to me whenever he's in a house and whenever he's attacking people, and for whatever reason, I just love the aesthetic of this movie. I grew up watching this one whenever I was younger. I had this one and the first one on DVD that I had gotten from a video store that was closing down. And I didn't even have Scream 2 for the longest time. And it actually works very well. It's a nice bridge, but I think that 1 and 3 go together so well that if you'd never even seen 2, you wouldn't need to, because I totally understood what was going on. They connect in such a brilliant way, and they tie back to each other so well that I just think that sometimes it makes 2 not unnecessary, but it seems kind of random to me. And I just prefer Scream in a universe whenever there is a linear objective and outcome and goal, whenever there's a timeline and a plot that has a conclusion to it. At the time, I really loved 2, and it's a perfect second chapter, but like I said in my Scream 2 review, it's a very, very different film. The way that they kind of tried to be meta about putting their ending on a literal film stage, and they started in a movie theater, and they didn't have an opening call. There's just a lot of different things that they broke ground with, but Scream 3 kind of get back to some of the things that I'm really familiar with and prefer, and I kind of find this one to be scarier for me. Now, that is because a lot of people want to take away credit for this, for not having the goriest scenes or the bloodiest kills, but I think that everyone is aware by now that the whole Columbine tragedy was very, very relevant whenever this was going on, and it completely impacted the production and the way that this film was made. And so it was the best that they could do with at the time, and it was still very edgy and pushing the boundaries. And if you asked me, this one scared me a lot more than sometimes the second or first one did whenever I was growing up. And it had to, I think that was because they were having to make up for some of the things they couldn't do with kills. Therefore, there's a lot of psychological terror and trauma, and there's a lot of story going on, and to me, I really appreciate this one because there's a lot of character development. Seeing Sidney is so important to me. And we see her right after we lose Cotton. That was a crazy thing. It blew my mind, like I said, whenever I saw him. It was the perfect way to, you know, have his character being involved, because it was the first time that we really had that shock of you know, like someone we know in the opening. And we follow Sidney here, and she's kind of hide away in seclusion. People say that she's not in this film and that she doesn't have a huge part in it, but I completely disagree. I think that they cut back to her a great amount of times, you know. Her pieces are scattered throughout, and then very, very heavily prominent at the end. And I think that people have a problem with this, and like they said, because of the Columbine thing, they had to fill this movie in with more story, more plot, and more emotion because of the driving force in needing a reason for things to be done and stuff. So I think that can have people take away for some people whenever they're trying to go into it for slasher reasons or whatever. But for me personally, the story really worked. I don't feel like it takes away anything from the first one. I think it adds. I love the mystery of it. I love figuring out things that you thought you knew, or the whole whodunit aspect. That's the entire point of this franchise, and they did exactly that with this film. And so I really, really love it, and I appreciate it for that. I like the story of Dewey and Gale. So Gale obviously has been pretty famous after the events of the first two, and now she is like, you know, she has her own TV show. She's like an Ellen DeGeneres, or like a Drew Barrymore type of talk show kind of a person, but also is like, would, you know, be the equivalent of like a, you know, Instagram host of something. She's a pretty big deal, and she's giving lectures in LA and, you know, a guest speaking. That's pretty interesting. So I think it's very natural to find her character here, and I think that it's also natural for the police to reach out to her based off of the detective work that she had been kind of going through. We end up with her on the film set, and that is where one of my favorite aspects of this movie comes in, is a movie about movies, and that's one of my favorite concepts. I love things that break the fourth wall. I, you know, grew up watching TV shows about that, and there's lots of different, you know, moments or TV shows where they do something like this, and it's not everybody's favorite, but I really am a fan of that. And I also watched behind the scenes things growing up, and now I'm an actor in Hollywood, and I work on stages and film sets like these every single day. I'm going to Crafty, I'm walking the studio lots, you know, people are moving things, living here and being in this environment and understanding the world. It's made the layout of the stages more understanding to my knowledge. I totally get how and why and where they are, and it makes it really brilliant for me. And I think that that's something that maybe people who have that viewpoint can really identify with when it comes to this movie. I love how they establish where she is and what she's doing, and that she's changed her name to Laura, and that she's in her house for protection. She's got a dog, she's got a security system, she's got guns, she's got electric fences. She is hidden away, and it's a very natural thing that you would expect of a person. There's two things that happen whenever people have this sort of trauma that they endure, and I always really wanted to see Sidney like this, and she's a very strong person, and I appreciate her for that, but she is a human being, and people are real, and they have real feelings, and I like to see someone who's well-rounded, and that's the part of her that I had needed, and it's probably one of the things that makes this one of my favorite chapters, is this character development of her and discovering her feelings and how she operates, and we just learn more about her. You know, in the first one, she becomes a fighter. In the second one, is fighting, where she can't even, you know, like, let anything set in. You know, Randy's death is even very hard for her in the second. She's really coping in the second one. In this one, she has aftermath of her problems, which is different than wallowing in her problems, and she's really trying to move on and do the right things in life to be able to make sure that she has what she needs for her own sanity. Whenever she's on the stages and she's in this movie for real and it's going full force, that's one of my favorite parts. Is I always wanted to know what it would be like if Sidney went back to the location of the original. That's one of my favorite things, is people revisiting locations, especially of traumatic events, because it's like, oh wow, this is where it all happened, and remember that time. And it's really cool to see like the film set, because it's a way of like walking through her memory, because it's almost like a shell, just like a movie set is. It's not completely there. It's just enough to be eerie, and what you think is safe enough to be able to walk through it. And so she's having this whole like facing something and seeing and staring down something she hadn't even thought of or realized she would ever have to see again in her life. Having two Gale Weathers is one of my favorite aspects as well. I think Parker Posey, who plays Jennifer Jolie, is so perfect. I was completely in love with her character whenever I was younger. She made this film so great to watch. I've actually been to her house up in the woods or the hills, whenever I did the Scream 3 location video. And there's just a lot of fun coming from her wittiness and the way that she would expect to be things, and just the characteristics. And that's the whole meta part of the being on the sound stages that I really, really love about this film. So trying to defend that, some of the parts that are hard for people are like the voice changer. A lot of people have a really big problem with that. And my best way to explain that, for either making the story stronger for you or just helping you sleep at night if that's what you like, or you don't even have to buy into it all. But my explanation or my understanding of it has been, first of all, there are voice changers in real life, and the technology has come way a long time. And sometimes in the movie industry, they have the ability to do things that are not readily available to the public. And if you think about the fact that, spoiler alert, the director of this movie is the killer, he has access to the voice changers and the technology. So everyone wants to be like, how did he get, Sidney's mom's voice? She was an actor. Every single actor is mic'd up with a mic underneath of their shirt or in their back, or there's a boom operator in the archives. Okay, every single character on Stab 3, there's several movies, and they're doing dialogue now. The same with Sidney. He calls up Sidney and then gets her voice while on the phone with her. So that's just one of the ways that I've always explained that away, if it ever helps make it easy. Also, another thing that sometimes people pick about this film that they also really heavily pick on the fourth one is timing. Now, also this comes from being an editor and a script supervisor. When we're showing you something on the screen, what do you see? Exactly what we're showing you, right? Well, then we have to show you the opposite. And whenever you're watching a conversation with someone and it's cutting back and forth, you still hear the person, but sometimes you don't see them because we're showing you the other person's reaction. Well, sometimes during action scenes, if you could take them all and edit it in a way where you could see that all of these things are playing out at once, but you can only view them at one time so it looks like a longer sequence, that's another one of the things. So when it comes to the end and the final conclusion, the final showdown, and we see Sidney face to face with Ghostface, and we find out the revelation, an awful thing happens where a woman was completely taken advantage of and was trying very hard to deal with her trauma and wanted to get rid of it. And whenever Roman reveals himself to be the killer and the long lost half sibling of Sidney, this is totally concludable. This happens at Grey's Anatomy all the time, in real life all of the time. And I always kind of had this heart-wrenching feeling for Sidney whenever she finds out. And this final act between her and him is one of the strongest. And I think that it's also smart that it's like, of course, the person who was the killer was the person who was making the movie of the killings and started the whole spree and had the things and lit the things and knew what script he wanted to kill by and which person would go where. Love that whole aspect. It was a great set of circumstances. I have a really big appreciation for Roman. I honestly prefer him over the killers in the second movie and his motives. I think it really heavily ties in. I think it adds to it. I think it does the perfect mystery aspect very well. They beat the crap out of each other, and they're really fighting for their lives. Each one of them wants what they want. And like Sidney says, the villain dies, and he's trying to skew the whole narrative and get what he wants. And I think that they just tie the whole trauma, family, and scary movie and meta aspect into this movie just as well as the first two, if not maybe better than the second one for me. That's not everybody's viewpoint, it's just mine. That's another thing, people really hate her bangs. I didn't understand what was wrong with them whenever I was younger. When I got a little older in like 2015, I was like, I totally get it, and I still understand now. But it's like almost 2022, and styles have changed so much, and 2000s are coming back around again, and you wouldn't believe the amount of celebrities that have had that same hair, and people praise them for it. And honestly, when I watch this back, she doesn't look that bad. It's not that jarring. I think there's 100 different hairstyles, and there's 100 different bang lengths, and to pick at someone or make fun of someone or say a movie is terrible for that, it's weird. I think it's a perfect time capsule. You would never watch an 80s film and, look at someone's 80s hair and be like, oh my god, that just ruins this movie for me. You'd be like, oh my god, look at her fucking 80s hair. That's so cool. So I wish people would think about it like that. Well, that was my review of Scream 3, and I just love Sidney. She's the ultimate final girl to me, and this was the ending of her story in the original trilogy. And when we leave it at this frame, her life can be peaceful and until otherwise. I love this franchise. I love the strength. I love the ways that I learn things from her. I love this original trilogy. I was so excited whenever I was younger to own all of them, and I was also wanting a fourth one so much whenever I was growing up. So I'll talk about that in the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you comment down the bottom what you think about Roman and what do you think about the previous 2 chapters, and where does it fit in for you? How does it tie in? And do you prefer, you know, this feel of the movie over the other ones? You know, I know a lot of people don't like this movie, but I think that that is said enough. That's already said. So why not do the rare thing and talk about the things that we liked, you know? I almost never hear people say good things about it, so I would love to hear those things, you know. Check out some of my other videos. I've done a bunch of different genres, and I'm going to be doing some more. I've done some location visits. I've actually visited the locations for this movie. Be sure to check out for whenever I post something new, and I'll see you the next time. Alright, thanks for watching. Bye.